So, first, Chrissy, how are you?
Doing all right, considering the circumstances, as well as can be expected.
Fair enough. Well, one thing I generally feel about people like you, very, very involved musicians who do work a lot, who like to work a lot, who are somewhat of I don't know if the term is endearing enough, but a studio rat in a way. Um,
Yeah,
are times like these kind of bittersweet, where there are some good things where you can focus a lot of time on music?
it is. Yeah, it's a mixed bag. So I am getting a lot of music written.
Hmm.
It feels kind of weird and pointless to be writing club music when you have no idea when the next time it's going to get played in a club. Like I I don't, I didn't get into this to write music for live streams. So like,
Right.
so it's weird. I have all this time to work on music, but working on it, sometimes it feels really great, and sometimes it does feel kind of like, what's the point? Or how am I going to release this? Or when am I going to be able to release this? On the other hand, from the DJ side, I feel like there's always kind of like organizational work that every DJ wants to do of getting their library really like fine-tuned and in order. And, oh, I'm going to tag all my files with what year they came out so I can look by year, or, whatever weird, obsessive kind of organizational nonsense you want to do with your music library. And now we all finally have the time to do that. So I'm going to, whenever there's a gig again, I'm going to show up with the most preparation and organization that any DJ has ever. It's really, yeah.
That's an interesting point because considering how you kind of got into this whole music thing, I think you were introduced to this type of music by your sister, and then you kind of fell into it. And you were one of those people who were, I don't know if a collector is the right word, but who diligently sought through all those record boxes and stuff. So has there always been a kind of I don't know if analytical is the right word, but that side of it, okay, where you're really interested in the kind of everything that's to do with the music?
I do think, yeah, that I am kind of very interested in the history and the details and the stories behind it, and that does kind of naturally translate into being a little bit of, yeah, like an analytical, detail-oriented person about it. I mean, I don't know how much of it is just like a coping mechanism, like we all want something in our lives that we can control, and maybe having a really good control over my record collection and having it really organized allows me to take my mind off of the chaos of everything else in the world. So how much of it is just that kind of Sisyphean grasp and having some amount of control over something. But yeah, it is certainly, if there was ever a time in our lives where we feel like we need to have control over something, now is it. Right. So that whether that ramping up is coincidental or not, I guess other people can psychoanalyze me about that one.
Fair enough. Now, what you just mentioned about, well, not being able to perform is quite interesting as well, because I read somewhere in a previous interview you did where you mentioned that a lot of your productions are informed by live shows and by kind of that feeling of being in a club. So now that that's gone, do you see a kind of a change in your musical interest or just where tracks are going?
I think that it has been more of a process coming up with ideas, because like you say, so often I'm inspired by parties or situations where I think, oh, I really wish I had a track like this to work here in between these tracks, or something like that, some sort of functional DJ thought about what I want. And not being at parties, not being in clubs, I don't have the inspiration coming that way. So there were, at the beginning of this, there were several months where I just didn't really have any ideas for new tracks. So I worked on other stuff. I got a couple of remixes done for other people, and did some finishing up on some songs that I had already started and things like that. And it took a few months to kind of start to get inspired again.
Okay.
And there's other places and other situations that kind of give me musical ideas. So I've been getting things, outside of the club, but yeah, we'll see. My concern is I'm so used to making something and then testing it at a party that we'll see how all this stuff turns out. Once it's ready to actually be played in the club, I think it's going to be a surprise to not have the kind of process of testing it out along the way.
And part of this, I suppose, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but part of kind of the whole music industry in general is that it's constantly shifting, and now it's kind of forced to shift into a world where there's no live shows. So is this change, and you've been through a lot of changes, and then you have a very broad appreciation for music. So is this just one other thing you have to deal with in a way?
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly unprecedented and different than any other kind of change the industry has been through. But at the same time, every change is different than every other change the industry, like you say, it's always changing. And this is a very different kind of situation. But yeah, I think that we all have the capacity to be, flexible and get through this, and I don't know how it's going to change the music scene for the worse or for the better, but I'm hopeful that we come out of this having some improvements to things. My big hope, I think that this is going to further widen the gap between underground dance music and corporate, like private plane dance music. And if we can widen that gap and separate ourselves more from the big name, big money scene, I think that would be positive. I also think that the reduction in travel that is that we are in and is going to continue even after there's a vaccine. There's probably going to be a year or two where European DJs don't get to come to America, American DJs don't get to go to Europe, etc. And I'm hopeful that will be really positive for nourishing and developing local scenes. I want to see, I feel like London, for instance, or New York or Chicago were kind of didn't have the unique local scene identity that they did in the 80s or 90s, where you heard a record and you were like immediately like, oh, obviously that's from London, and I feel like a lot of cities were starting to kind of lose that a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see what 2 years of no out-of-town DJs does for local scenes. And I'm hoping that can bring some more unique, localized, city by city kind of ideas and diversity into the mix.
That's a very interesting thought, because I think you grew up in Kansas City, which I suppose had a very a scene of its own, but then you moved to Chicago, which has a big scene, and now you're in San Francisco, which has a different thing. How much do you think that the internet and the fact that now everybody can hear music from everywhere plays a role in this, where everything becomes kind of the local becomes less important in a way?
I think that the internet is a huge part of it. I think that in the United States, all our radio stations used to be kind of owned by different companies, and then basically there was legislation that allowed a handful of corporations to come and buy them all up. There used to be like an anti-monopoly rule that wouldn't let them buy all these radio stations, and now all the radio stations are owned by a handful of companies that centrally plan the playlists, and so you don't have like local R&B hits that are only a hit in one city. And I think that was in the 80s a huge part of how like house music and Detroit techno and Miami bass and go-go and all these local scenes kind of evolved. So I think that's a big part of it. And then the internet has just exacerbated that. And I also think, the mobility of everything and my generation and anyone younger than me is much more likely to live outside of their hometown than people 20 years older than me were. Sure. And I think that also has a big influence on it. There's just all these factors at once. So I don't think we're going to go back to the localism of the 1980s necessarily, because you still got the internet and you still got live streams, and I can still hear what the kids in Paris are doing. But hopefully we have a little bit of some local kind of unique voices from different places popping up again.
One thing I've noticed in talking to people from the electronic music scene is that a lot of artists are very supportive of each other. They play each other's mixes, they remix each other's songs, all that kind of stuff. So do you have, despite what we've just talked about, is there a good sense of community and maybe for you in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think in the kind of scene in San Francisco, there are a lot of really talented DJs and I have a lot of friends here who I like as people and also really kind of respect them as DJs or as artists. And so that kind of local scene sense of community is really nice to have. It's nice to be in a place where you can have that. And also I feel like, like you say, there is that internet scene, that like global internet underground where I feel like there are a lot of artists who I really respect and value and like as people who maybe I've only met in person once or twice, and sure. We talk on the internet and share tracks and stuff. And so I'm hoping that both of those can kind of be strengthened for all of us by the like deprivation of this time.
Have you been and I think you have, but have you been as excited about new music in this time? Where have you just been scouring the internet and just trying to find new records and
Yeah, there's been a lot of good stuff coming out. I think it always comes in waves, and some genres kind of get boring or fall into a rut at the same time that other genres, refine their voice or get invented, sure. and or reinvented. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, there's always so much amazing music coming out. It's just a matter of doing the work to find it.
Well, I want to get back to your music a little bit because we've been talking quite general so far.
Yeah.
You mentioned that after 4 months or after a couple of months, you kind of found that inspiration again. What were the first couple of tracks that came out of that period where you felt creative again?
Really just kind of like melodic, ravey kind of things. I think, I ride my bike a lot places, and I think whenever I'm like on my bicycle, I can't, there's no like radio, there's no TV, there's no internet to distract me. I'm not on my phone. It's like a good place to just like have an empty mind and have ideas come to you. And so I often will just have like melodies come to me that I notice I'm humming, and then it's like, oh, this isn't a melody from something. I made this up, and I have to, like get off my bike and hum it into my phone so I don't forget it or something like that. And so I think the things I've been writing have tended to be more focused around some melody or motif rather than like a rhythmic idea that I'm inspired by at a party.
Right.
And they're still very like dancey. It's just that the songwriting is starting from the melody as opposed to starting from the drums.
Well, it's funny then, because I hear from artists every once in a while that sometimes, especially if they have quite a big back catalog, that when they come up with a melody or something, they have to go through that. Did I think of this before? So you, as somebody who's made quite a bit of music in your time, do you encounter those kind of things? Is it trickier to figure out new fresh
I've totally
ideas?
stolen from myself before, and also stolen from other people, where like I'll write a song, I'll finish it, and I'll be like, oh, that's cool, and then I'll listen to it again and I'll be like, wait, there's a melody in there that is seriously like one note different from a Tears for Fears record, and I've got to change that. I've got to swap that out with something that, I think accidental plagiarism is absolutely a thing from yourself or from others, and you just have a melody and you don't necessarily like, brains are funny, man. Brains work weird. So I've definitely experienced that, where I've put a melody in a song and then been like, wait, I have already done that, and you go and change it. Fortunately, I've never released something and then noticed it afterwards. But it's bound to happen sometime, and I'll probably not. I'd lie about it. I'd just pretend like it hadn't happened until somebody caught me.
Until there's a big lawsuit.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to sue myself. If I steal it from somebody else, then yeah, we got a problem. But if I steal from myself, fine, take it. I can have it, whatever.
No, that's what you mentioned about the brain. Then does it work the other way, where that allows a certain sense of creativity then in you, because it is so open and you're willing to think of anything? And is there any particular? I'm not phrasing this right, but is there any particular reasoning why your interest is so broad? Can you explain that kind of?
I think other people should explain why their interests are so narrow. There's so much music.
Fair enough.
I'm suspicious of anybody who like only listens to deep house or only listens to like Berlin techno. Like, there's so much good music out there. Why not? Also, I think I just get bored easy. I think that's probably part of it too. Right. It's that I have a short attention span, and so I have to like play 2 records of house, and then I want to like switch over to jungle, or like switch over to like soca or dancehall or UK funky or whatever.
And last year you released Resilience, and that was I think it was more going back to that ravey kind of sound. So now you have a new EP coming up, Give U XTC. Since kind of Resilience, how has the sound changed in your mind?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I think this new EP is a little more drummy, a little more housey, but at the same time, I'm still writing things that are kind of more on that ravey, like resilient sounding vibe, and I don't. Some very loud vehicle passing behind me on the street. I'm sorry. And then I have an EP that I'm working on that's like freestyle, almost like dance pop record. So I just try to be open to writing whatever kind of music comes to me, and then worry about genre and how to release it later. And so I think so this label Cool Ranch that Give You XTC is coming out on tends to be more the outlet for like drummy, sample-based, housey type things that I do. And so that's why this is coming out there. But I'm always kind of just writing whatever works and waiting until I have the right place to release whichever. You know.
How much is that dependent on mood then, what comes out on any particular moment?
Probably a lot. I haven't actually thought about it, but yeah, it's a lot of it is kind of how I'm feeling in the moment, and then also kind of the mood of the scene. You know, like this EP Give You Ecstasy I wrote recently, but there have been times where I've written something and it just didn't make sense to come out in the music world then, and I sit on it for 2 or 3 years, and then suddenly it's like, oh, now is the time where the culture is more interested in these kinds of sounds, and maybe this makes sense again, you know?
Final question then, having been around for quite a bit, what for you has been the most important, so to say, in your longevity? Has it been the diversity in your kind of taste and abilities?
Yeah, I think that liking a lot of things and being able to play a lot of things and kind of shift to adjust to trends and current interests in dance music without feeling like I was doing something I didn't like, or doing something that wasn't true to me, or selling out, or you know, faking it, I guess, has been really helpful in being able to keep, you know, I just think of like DJs who, you know, from 15 years ago, who only played dubstep and only wanted to play dubstep, and then you had all those other DJs who played dubstep and kind of like dubby techno and house, and those are the ones that we still remember from that era, because, you know, they're still, you know, like still doing things. And so seeing that, and the same thing when it happened with like jungle and drum and bass, really kind of reinforced to me how important it is to have a lot of things that you love and care about, so that you can always have some part of your voice that is interesting to people, even if the scene falls out of love with like one of the genres you like, you know?
Right. Well, one last thought then, because you mentioned the new EP. Well, when can we expect the new EP, and do you have a name for it yet?
Well, that's a good question. So the EP that we just spoke about, Give You Ecstasy, was supposed to come out the 4th of December, but I found out this week that there has been a problem with the pressing plant,
right?
And I guess some like because of the shutdown and everything, that, you know, they only have a couple of people in the plant at a time, and so everything's pretty delayed. Right. So I think that is going to come out in February. The more like freestyle record that I'm working on, it's with a vocalist. Her name's Maria Amor. She did the vocals for a track called Your Ghost that was on Resilience. So she and I have finished the songs for that, and we're getting like a couple of remixes and things like that, getting the art finished up. So that's probably going to come out in the spring, but we're still waiting to get the remixes back. So I don't, you know, have like a firm date on that.
It's very difficult with all the uncertainty to even say anything about the future. But
yeah, and the moment you do say something, it gets changed.
it's
So
immediately.
yeah. But Give You XTC, I think, is going to be the first weekend or the first Friday in February,
Okay.
and then that freestyle EP is going to come sometime after that. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait a little bit longer then, but that's all good.
Yeah.
Chrissy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.